Great. Well, I will get us started. Thank you again for joining. If you're new to the room, I had mentioned my name is Lisa Bailey Vavanese, and I work at the Center for Justice Innovation, and I'm on the board of IDRA. I'm really happy to be here with you all today to hear from three great panelists about data dashboards. This is our IDRA monthly meeting, and we structure these meetings around presentations that the IDRA community tells us are useful to them. So we really appreciate any ideas that you all send us, anybody who volunteers to be a speaker. Please be sure to reach out at any time to the board if you have ideas for us. I know that everybody has a description of what we'll talk about today, and our three great panelists will introduce themselves. A couple of housekeeping items. You probably noticed that we are recording. We are going to post this to YouTube following today's meeting, so please know that we are recording. And also to let you know that the three panelists plan to speak for a few minutes each, and then they're going to save about 10 minutes at the end of the meeting for questions. You're welcome to pop those questions whenever they come to you in the chat, and we'll just field them at the end of the meeting and ask them to our panelists. And we also welcome you at the end of the meeting. It's great if you want to turn your camera on and raise your hand. We'll take any verbal questions as well. So I think I've said enough, and I'll pass it to our panelists. I hope all of you don't mind just giving us a little bit of background about yourself when it's your turn to speak, and we'll do Q&A at the end. So Steph, I'll pass it to you first. Oh no, Erik, it was my job to pass it to you first. I'll do that.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Erik Stilling. I'm the Chief Information and Technology Officer for the newly rebranded Office of the State Public Defender for the state of Louisiana, formerly Louisiana Public Defender Board. I've been doing this since 2008, and we were tasked by the enabling statute that created our office or our agency to collect data, among many other things. But my charge was to collect data. Now we started collecting caseload data, and quickly realized that it didn't really answer all the questions that were being asked of us from the legislature, the Louisiana Supreme Court, the governor's office. So we worked with our vendor, which is Justice Works Defender Data, to build kind of a cobble onto the side of the case management system, a financial management system, which tracks expenditure, very granular expenditures and revenue streams, which we also have a weird revenue stream where we rely on conviction and user fees to a great extent. Not saying I like that idea, but that's what we're stuck with. So we added the financial management system, which also collects compensation data, human resource training data, etc. And so we're collecting all this data, and aside from a few kind of superficial in the can off the shelf analyses that were provided by the vendor, we couldn't answer the questions we wanted to answer until we got access to the data. And we realized that really we were given a charge to collect data, and nobody really had much to say about what to do with it, aside from a couple of caseload issues. But people were asking us questions, like, legislators and what have you. So we were able to actually put together the analyses that were relevant kind of on an ad hoc basis, and some of them were frequently asked, year after year, or legislative session after legislative session. So we decided we were going to build a dashboard. We got together we queried all 42 district offices throughout the state and asked the management there, what frequently asked questions do they get? What analyses, what gauges, what I call them, do they look at on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? And we got a lot of feedback. We can distill that down to 6 main questions and then did focus groups with some of the leading and more technologically adept field directors. And we developed the dashboard based on those things that everybody agreed were most useful. And I'll try to share that with you now. Okay. And let's see if this is gonna work. Okay. So I think you can see this now, and we still haven't
Yep.
rebranded this. We still have our old logo up there. But what we see here is revenues and expenditures. This is the whole state. Now we can go to any district we want, out of 42 here. We can do different years, ending in the month of September. Now the data is not due until the 15th of the subsequent month. So we give you 2 weeks to get your books in order. That's why September is zeroed out this year. What we decided was most useful was looking at month by month revenues and expenditures, revenues in red. I'm sorry, revenues in green, expenditures in red. And the pastel is last year. So we can take that out if we don't want to see it. But most people agreed that at a glance, if you look at last year, it's pretty helpful to see what this month last year looked like. And if you see something unusual, it should jump out at you and it should call your attention. It may be nothing. Like if you look here, last year, this statewide, we brought in $6 million. And the same month of July this year, only 3.5. Well, it turns out we got several $1,000,000 to buy some office space. So it's alarming, but explicable. And so this is what management does. Each manager has their own, and can only see their own district. We could see all 42. So this was very important. If you suddenly discover our revenues are way down this month, you want to go find out why. Likewise, expenditures. Excuse me. And we can break this out into, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Give me a second. I had it all set up too. Anyway, so we're able to do a number of at a glance comparisons. Here we go. Sorry about that, gang. Okay. So we're able to look at a number of different, what I call gauges. This is a detail of this past month's revenues. And again, we don't have anything in this month yet. We have cases in pretrial detention. That's very important to know who's in jail right now, because that's our most high priority cases. Looking at new cases each month. As you can see, the case data is in because it's real time, but the financial data, we give you 2 weeks till the 15th to get September data entered. You have till October 15th. So, but the case data is all live. And this is pending cases right now. So at the moment we logged in, this is how many cases we had. So if somebody entered something 2 minutes ago, it's in here. And we can break these out. LWOP is life without the benefit of parole. I don't know if y'all call it that. But you can dig into any one of these and get more detail. And again, closed cases. And it's really valuable to look at these three when you're managing your attorney personnel. And you can see these are on different scales. So when you see a lot of cases coming in and not a lot of cases going out, you're getting a backlog, and that's a problem. And you'll see it here. So anyway, that's the long and the short of how we look at using a dashboard. And this is for our oversight and monitoring, as well as each individual district. The management there gets these same metrics, but only for their district. I guess that kind of wraps it up for me. Shall I pitch it to Stev?
Great, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. It's funny, I was just looking at some data of mine and saw an error and was trying to fix it before my presentation.
Sorry, dude. I can tap this for a moment.
But we're good. It'll be fine. Let me just present here, and then we can get started. Okay, and folks can see it okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, great. My name's Stev Weidlich. I am at the King County Department of Public Defense. King County is in Western Washington. The city of Seattle is within our boundaries, but we have a number of other cities that and unincorporated areas as well. So when you think of King County and you look at our data, it's mostly Seattle is driving the bus here, but we've got other areas as well. I have presented in the past at IDRA things, and but I'll so some of you may be familiar with the unique structure that King County has, but I'll go over it just briefly because it really does kind of come down into how we do our dashboards and think about our management of our staff. We have basically 2 regions within King County that we've got 2 courthouses, and so we manage to 2 regions. One is in the city of Seattle, and one is in one of our southern suburbs, Kent. We have 4 practicing divisions, so our department is split into 4. Actually, it's split into 5. We have one division that sort of manages it all, but it's split into 4 practicing divisions. And that is, and there's ethical walls between all of those divisions. They're operated like their own separate law firms. And that is to keep conflicts down for our department. So we're able to keep about over 90% of our cases in-house without sending to our conflict panel, which is something that we're happy to do. I'm going to be concentrating mostly on felonies today. Felonies is where we have probably the most issue with regard to staffing and workload, and the most questions that we get from the public and from our own staff with regard to data and data analysis. We also do district court misdemeanors. We have a family defense practice. We have what we call Involuntary Treatment Act court, which I think other jurisdictions probably call mental health court. Of course, we've got a juvenile practice, and then we also do, we have a separate contract to provide public defense services for the city of Seattle, which is sort of separate. It's a separate contract, but we still look at that data for management. We also have 2 panels. We have what we call our assigned counsel panel, which is also known as our conflict panel. When we have true conflicts, we send it out. We also have a contract panel, which we call our capacity panel. In recent years, just workloads have swollen, especially after COVID, and the courts have kind of come back into full swing. We've run out of capacity, especially at the end of the month. And so we have a number of contracts with local independent attorneys to provide services. So you might see information about contract or CON, and those are our contract attorneys. Our data structure is similar. It's not as large as the state of Louisiana, so it's just 1 county, but we've got a central case management system. We've got integrations with the jail, with our county prosecutor, and with our courts. They send data into us every day, all through the day, on bookings, filings, and court appointments and hearings that get integrated into the larger case management system for our staff. All that data is taken and backed up every night and is put on a separate server, which is the data mart that has been provided by our case management system vendor. And then we can do ad hoc reports within the case management system, but we tend to do more of our larger and bigger analyses and our larger, more complicated dashboards and data sets in Power BI, which is a Microsoft product, which Microsoft is based here. The county has a relationship with them as sort of a vendor to provide us all of our stuff. So we use Power BI as our business intelligence platform. It's worked out pretty well for us. So the data needs that we have are basically trying to understand filings from the prosecutor and the pace of those, the assignments to our divisions and the pace of those, and how are those equitable across the divisions, and do they make sense for the practices and the units that they are most involved in. And then within the divisions, assignments to individual attorneys. Are individual attorneys getting more work or less work than others? Are they getting are they getting cases that they're qualified to do, or well, and how does that affect workload within their unit? Understanding the current workload of attorneys and support staff, and then finally performance and information about dispositions, and that's used to sort of understand how our clients are doing at the end of their representation. The biggest questions we have really are, do we have enough staff for the cases that we're seeing? We do a model. Our budget every 2 years is based on a model of projected work that we'll be getting from the prosecutor and how much work those cases represent per hour, and then that our staffing is based on that need. And so the question is, how close is reality to the projected information that we saw from our biannual model? What does that mean for FTE staffing and workload? And we recently changed to a case weighting system with regard to understanding workload, and that's been a huge change for us. And we're trying to understand kind of how the new case weights have affected our workload and our staff. So let me close out of this, and I'll show you basically what we have to look at on a daily basis. It's just sort of a selection of things. So this is a web-hosted dashboard that our management, actually all of our staff can use, and to look at stuff. But it's our management that gets alerts on it every day. They get some reports kind of emailed directly to them in the morning. And some are just sort of here that they can visit if they want to look at them. But it's a hosted dashboard that's private for our department. And so the first thing I'll take a look at is filings. And so here are the filings from the prosecutor. And again, like what Eric showed, it's important for us to look at year over year change and understand if there's trends or not. And understanding, if there's a low point or a high point, is there explanation beyond that? What was the reasoning behind that? And is this trend going to go up or down? So for example, last winter, you can see in 2023, we had a really low kind of trough of filing cases from the prosecutor. And the question came to us is, this is, as you can imagine, we got to about November and December and we saw these low numbers. And the question became, is this what we're going to see in 2024? Is there some sort of new shift in filings at the prosecutor that we need to take into consideration when we think about staffing at 2024? And so it's important to understand this pace of filings for a trend. You can see, no, there was no change. It was really just kind of a small dip, and they came roaring back in 2024, and we've had larger numbers in 2024 than we've seen in 4 years. But it was important to have that conversation with them. We take a look at felony filings, misdemeanor filings. Our Involuntary Treatment Act court also has a high number of filings, and we have sort of a baseline of the number. This is this dashed line of what we would expect from our model. Basically, if the number's higher than that dashed line, it's a problem. If it's lower than that, maybe we're getting a little bit of slack in the line, but it's important for us to understand kind of where it is in relation to that benchmark. So then we can talk to our agency partners to understand, is this part of a larger trend? Is it always going to be above this number? And if so, can we change our modeling in the next budget cycle to add staff? I wanted to, once we get cases into the divisions or into the department, we send them to one of our 4 divisions. And And this is a look at our felony filings over the last 24 months. And we try to understand, which division do we send them into? One of the nice things that we have with this kind of hosting thing is that because it's online, because it's kind of a cloud service, and the way that it's set up, you can use the dashboard to sort of filter the data that you're interested in. You can, of course, filter by location, and so this is our Seattle area. This is our Kent area, and so you can try to understand, where are the trends happening, where are the differences between the two regions, and how does that affect staffing between our two areas. Again, you can see that we've had more felony assignments coming in our doors in the last couple of months that we've seen in years. So it's you caught us at a very busy time here in King County with the number of felony assignments. So when we think about sending them to places, we get cases into basically a central repository, and we have to send them out to different divisions. One of the things that we use, one of the dashboards that we use to make that decision is this our tracking sheet for our coordinators. Our coordinators send them out to the various divisions. And we have our felony cases are differentiated by case weight tier. So felony low, felony mid, felony high. If you're familiar with the more recent RAND study that came out, they also split out these felonies generally by those tiers, and we adopted that differentiation as well. Based on our staffing and the number of people that we have in each unit, we know how many cases they should be able to take over the course of a month, based on the number of hours that it takes on that case, based on the case weight tiers, and the number of people they have. And that's what the black line is. As we add a case, that blue line ticks up and up and up and up and up over the course of the month. So the idea is to use this dashboard every single day to determine, if we get a felony low in, and all things being equal, it doesn't have conflicts with some of our divisions, which division, and it's in Seattle, say, which division is lowest in felony low that could take that case, and try to balance the distribution of assignments across our divisions to keep our attorneys under caseload. Doesn't always work out. Of course, when we have high months, our blue lines go over the black target. This is our rolling 30 days. You can see that we had way more felony lows in both Seattle and Kent than we anticipated and that we were staffed for. So we have people that are kind of working over their projected caseload just because we've had too many assignments and too many filings over the past couple of months. And this is an important thing to know when we start thinking about how to balance cases. So this is at the division, at the individual attorney level. We take a look at the felonies that are assigned to each individual attorney, how many cases they have, how many credits that they've accrued over the case of the year, and then looking at the total cases by case weight tier that's been sent to each division per month, at the 3 months and at the 12 months. I think one of the probably the most important and helpful tools that we have is looking at the number of credits that have been sent this month in the past 3 months. Again, this dotted line is basically the monthly maximum that we would expect for the attorneys. And as they, over the course of the month, if they get close to this line, we know to just kind of pull them off caseload, pull them off getting assigned new cases to keep them under their caseload max month after month. And this is updated every day with new cases that come in based on the case weight tiers. Just a couple more that I wanted to show you that we use. We open cases. If you're familiar with stocks and stock charts, open cases is something that we look at and try to understand for our department as well. Are we adding cases to the backlog? Are we closing more than we're opening? Are we opening more than we're closing? And how is that different across our various divisions? And how is that within for our various attorneys. Each green line is basically a month where we started high and closed low, so that we closed more than we opened. Every red line is a month that we opened more than we closed. You can see us kind of coming out of COVID when the courts were closed. That was this kind of big hump at the end of 2020. And then since then, we've had kind of a slow march up. We've had a couple of good months in closing things. But what's nice about this dashboard, and I think that people appreciate, is that people can go in and take a look at their own attorneys. Each attorney can take a look at their own caseloads and understand, did they close a bunch? Have they opened a bunch over time? How are they doing in closing? And how many open cases do they have? And how has that changed over time? People can do that by division as well. If someone wants to look at just their unit, so this is ACA, and this is ACA ACA in Kent. And so you can see how the changes are between the division and then also within the location. So the dynamic kind of disaggregation is a really useful tool for us. And then finally, we take a look at closed cases. Let's see if I can find closed cases over here. Here we go. Those are closed cases. Again, it's just closed cases per month. This is updated every day by division. And I think what's really valuable here is understanding the trial dispositions and the plea dispositions. So we have what we call negotiated incentives. High proportion of our cases, 93% of cases that go to a plea are pled guilty with a negotiated incentive, and then within that number, we've got a breakdown of the negotiated incentives of reduced charges or other charges dismissed or other cases dismissed, and we track that as well. And again, that can be disaggregated by unit, it can be disaggregated by area, and it can even be disaggregated down to the individual attorney, which is really helpful when people kind of think back over their year, when they think about their it's review time and meeting with their managers and their supervisors about training opportunities or opportunities for growth or celebrating big wins. So we've got a lot of data that's coming in, and what I guess if there's any recommendation I can make to the people here in the panel is that we've had a lot of really good feedback using some sort of like cloud-based business intelligence platform that can be disaggregated for to region or to year or to even the individual attorney, and then sharing that broadly. And so it takes the load off of our staff in terms of like having to generate a PDF every couple of days to send it out to people. People can just kind of come here and visit it. And once you get it, it takes a little while to get it set up, but once you have it set up, you can just have it set on an automatic refresh every single day, and it just kind of goes. And we've had a lot of success structuring our dashboards and our data refreshes for that as well. And that's it. Thanks everyone, and I'll pass it on to the next person and see if I can stop sharing my screen. How do I do that? Stop share. Great.
And Stev, while I'm sharing my screen, thanks, Stev. While I'm sharing my screen, do you want to just the one question in the chat is what case management system are you using?
We are using a Journal Technologies product called eDefender. It's part of their eCourt suite.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Seth. That was great, and thanks, Eric, as well. I just want to say that, there's already things from looking at their dashboards that I'm like, oh, this would be great to look at. So I think this is also just a valuable thing to the three of us, just to look at each other's dashboards. So I'm with Pinal County Public Defense, and just a little bit about Pinal County before I go into who I am. Pinal County is a population of about 503,000 individuals as of 2024. We're considered a rural county. We're one of the fastest growing counties in the country at this point. And mainly that's because we're right there next to Phoenix, and Phoenix is growing so much that now they no longer can grow in their own county really due to just different things. And so they're there's a large population kind of in the Santan Valley area. But we're overall 5,300 miles of county, and we have a large mountain kind of dividing half of us. So we have a very rural population on the other side of the mountains that is very disconnected from us. We have two kind of cities, Casa Grande and Apache Junction, that are around 60,000, but otherwise we're pretty much just a bunch of suburbs of Phoenix. So going into public defense services and myself a little bit. So I've worked, I'm the operations manager for Pinal County Public Defense Services. We, up until 2 years ago, there was no public, or 3 years ago, sorry, there was no public defense services. We were underneath the courts. I wasn't there. I worked for Pima County at that time. And then they realized that they needed to separate it from the judiciary. And so we now answer to the county manager, who answers to the board of supervisors. And the public defender's office has existed for quite some time, although all of their funding requests and assignments were still kind of just done by the court. And so they moved under public defense services. And then we have 54 individual contract attorneys that we indirectly manage. We manage their caseloads and assignments and expenses, but obviously there's some variance in how much we can really manage them. And so that's just sort of the breakdown really quickly of our public defense system. I do think it's very different than King County, where there's 3 larger contractors that are being managed. And so it's a little bit tougher on that end from management quality side. So I'm going to exit PowerPoint now, and I'm going to start just with our just a basic management dashboard that my director and county management sort of can see just from a larger standpoint. So over here on the left is just our cases by case types. And so we have, all these different types up here, and obviously felonies and EDC or misdemeanors. And then our EDC cases are over here. And then of course, our other large portion of our cases are dependencies. All of our attorneys, by the way, on contract are hourly. I probably should have stated that. And they're all the same rate of hourly. We pay lawyers regardless of what kind of lawyering they're doing. Aside from capital cases, we do pay a different rate for those. And it's $100 an hour for anything except for capital, which is $150 or $125, depending on the first chair or second chair. And so we generally, this is just sort of my boss's ability to kind of see what makes up the large portion. Obviously, felony is still making up the largest portion of or criminal cases in general. And I think delinquencies as well. I can't remember their color. There we go. So they're making up a fairly large percentage. Over here on the right is really just the intake and bench warrants and open. I will say in general, our sheriff's office does every Thursday, they call it roundup because we're cowboys still here in Pinal County. And so they call it a roundup, and they pull at random 100 individuals on bench warrant status and go to their last known addresses and try to locate them. So these are our current cases of all cases in Pinal County ever that are still on bench warrant. It's much smaller than at least in Pima County, where it was a very large number that's always sticking out there. And so these are obviously just the felony cases specifically. Down below these 2 things that we're managing, we have an early disposition court that has been slowly reducing for reasons that we're not sure of, and we're continuing to watch it. So this is just something that our county manager has wanted to kind of see. And as you can see, that after about March of this year, it has just been dropping. These 2 months obviously haven't happened yet, but most of October has been scheduled already. And so we're just watching these drop. And our fear is we have a new county attorney that's been elected. Our fear is that our current county attorney all of a sudden maybe made some changes and is no longer charging on things that what they call basket cases, just meaning they're sitting in a basket somewhere that these could come back. So we're watching that kind of carefully. And then obviously our mental health cases we're sort of managing because we had a large spike in May of 2023, and we've seen those cases continue to stay. And so we're watching those fairly closely as well. And then scrolling down, these are actually just our misdemeanor courts. Our misdemeanor courts are all over the county. And so it's very difficult, not only for our attorneys, but for the county attorney. And so county management's always just intrigued to know what is our caseloads. Interestingly enough, this is actually the largest city in Pinal County, but this is where all of our suburbs of Phoenix are, which is unincorporated areas of Pinal County, but they are large suburbs. And so, so anyway, it's just an interesting thing. And then actually 13 cases are in Superior Court, which is only because they're probably on appeal. So they appeal to the Superior Court. So this is just our misdemeanor cases specifically. So this is our county management's dashboard. We do give them the ability to sort of see all of our lawyers' caseloads. These are specifically just criminal and mental health. But because that's where a lot of people always focus on why do we have so many lawyers, but obviously a lot of our contract lawyers. So this is both public defender and contract attorneys. And a lot of our contractors are just taking a few cases here and there. And many of them, you know, it's a murder case or this and that. You know, Rebecca Felmy, for example, only has 7 cases, but I know they're pretty serious. But I think at times when the county attorney says, you know, we only have so many lawyers and they have, you know, they have in total 75, we can oftentimes point out that many of these contractors are just taking a case here and there, and some of them, you know, a case just for the just on occasion for us. So this is our county management sort of dashboard, and a little bit of my director also looking at stuff. And then I'm going to jump in. I actually created a demo dashboard because I removed some things just for the purposes of you all being able to see. But from an assignment standpoint, these are the things that we're looking at every day decisions. So these are our cases that still need to be assigned. They haven't been assigned at all. There's still some from Monday, which was a little surprising to me. We usually try to get everything assigned in a couple of days, although I do know that the trial director is out this week from Public Defender's Office. I'm happy to say none of these are public defense services cases. Maybe on the next page, there's 2 cases from today that might be one of ours. But so we'll look at these cases, realize we need to assign a case. And then the first thing that we can look at as well is who has closed out cases in the last 7 days and what types of cases they've closed out. So if we need to assign a delinquency case, we could look at, you know, who's closed out some delinquencies and then start looking at those attorneys very specifically and sort of focusing in on, they might have some bandwidth to take a case. And so we'll first start with that. And then below that, we also have open cases, and these are not by attorney, but actually, so criminal is on our left, and then all other case types are on our right. And the reason that they're separated out that way is that most of our criminal lawyers aren't on another contract, and all of our lawyers on the other contracts do sort of mix and match a little bit. And so this just sort of allows us to kind of take a look at, if I saw that, you know, Jennifer Hill could take a case, then I could take a look at Jennifer Hill really quickly to see what is her case like. Her caseload in total, pretty high, so probably not assigning her any cases right now. But so we can just kind of look at that in detail and try to figure out, you know, whether or not it's something we would consider. Continuing to scroll down in our decision-making process, we would look at, you know, how many cases did get assigned to Jennifer Hill. And so I would be able to see that in the last 14 days, she still has been assigned a lot of cases. But then also on the right, I can see how many hours in the last 30 days be spent, because all of our lawyers have to track their time to be able to get paid. We're able to actually see the workloads by attorney. And so I would see, okay, Jennifer Hill's only done 165 hours, you know, and what I know is that she has a lot of dependency cases that are still sitting out there with 365-day reviews, and so it might be okay to assign her. And so as my staff are looking at who to assign, these are the charts they're using, and then one of the last charts are any upcoming trials that we might have. And so we'll have these trials coming up and being able to look at these. One thing that we're trying to add to this report right now, just sort of anecdotally, is how many funding requests have been submitted, because we actually send out a month ahead of time sort of a request to know whether or not they need trial clothing for their clients. And what I have now been including, I go and research, is we now include whether or not they have any experts on their cases, just sort of to make sure that they realize if they don't have an expert, that you're going to trial, never having no investigator, no expert. There are potential reasons why you might need to do that or might want to do that. But it's just sort of one way that I'm trying to now just sort of point out to them their quality of representation, if you will. And so in case they haven't done anything, it's just one last reminder. So again, these are just like our day-to-day decisions for case assignments. The other thing we do, I didn't pull up, I had to remove some things. Oh, one thing I wanted to show really quickly, is if we are looking at an attorney's caseloads, one of the other things my staff might also do, there's some fields that I removed from this. I also, for some reason, I removed the attorney's name at one point and just put in their bar number. But we could also then go look at these particular attorneys' cases, narrow it down, and then there's one of the things that's on here is also just their current status of the case, some note status, and so we can see if they're like, I'm waiting for state disclosure or waiting for a state plea. And so we could see that status as well. And that'll also help my staff in determining whether or not we assign an attorney a case. And so that's kind of our day-to-day decision-making for assignments. On a more broader basis of expenses, we are looking at this right now is our average hours per case type. So our felonies on average have about 14.28 hours. And these are for closed cases that closed, I believe it's in the last 365 days. And so the average felony has 14.28. And obviously there's some earlier cases that might be closed out, but then some cases that go to trial that probably have a lot more. Interestingly enough, when I first did this report, this was the most shocking number I saw out there. So we do have a lot of GALs in divorce cases, DO is divorce cases. And it's actually been increasing drastically, and we're meeting with the courts administration about this because I think the judges have found that they no longer actually have to be judges or put their name on the line and just get a lawyer to come in and make the recommendation for what's best for the child in the divorce cases, and then they're doing it. But it's actually spending a lot of time. Our attorneys on these DO cases are spending almost as much time as our attorneys on felony cases, which is very frustrating to me. I don't know if that means I need more hours on felonies or just less hours trying to figure out what to do in these divorce cases, but it really it makes me cringe every time I see this chart. For our traffic misdemeanors, which would be a lot of DUIs, there's 9.18 hours. Which doesn't surprise me much because with DUIs, we rarely get pleas for DUI cases. So a lot of those are going to trial. And then criminal misdemeanors, these are sort of non-traffic criminal misdemeanors, 7.63. And then our EDC cases, these are early dispositions. So these are cases that the state has identified that they're going to offer a good plea, note my air quotes. But I think obviously there's still quite a few that are being resolved in those cases. And then our mental health cases average, our dependency case average, and then our guardian conservator, our juvenile delinquency, and then we get into GALs for juvenile cases and then GALs for severance cases as well. So this is just sort of an average across the board. These are our attorney time entries over the last couple of years. We saw a large spike, and obviously we see an increase in the trend overall, but we've been really trying to figure out what that is. And actually, one of the things that we realized is that all of a sudden our judges, these are GAL cases specifically, so guardian ad litems, we realize that that's probably where our greatest spike is. And so we're trying to drill down further to figure out, is it appropriate for GALs in all these cases? We have, especially there's been a lot of GALs in juvenile delinquency cases because the state's asking for a GAL when they believe our public defenders are advising their attorneys wrongfully to not take the plea. So that's been an increase as well. So we're continuing to look at that. And then also our expenses. So this would be experts, investigators, and just looking at, this is sort of helps us understand how much of our money is still out there on open cases. And then, whether the case has been closed or whether we're still trying to deal with these cases. And then we also have this trick, I don't know if you've seen it in other counties, but where a lawyer will take the private retainer, but then afterwards have the courts find the client indigent. And then we are ordered to pay all the expert costs in these cases. And so we continue to track that. It's, ultimately we believe the clients deserve experts, so that's fine. But it's usually only a few lawyers and they usually take quite a large retainer before they take the case. So. And then finally, this is the expenses by category. So we're looking at just expert witnesses versus, we spend a lot of money on copies actually, because we do try to reimburse our lawyers on the copies for all of those larger records. And then I think our next largest one is also mileage. We do reimburse mileage if it's not driving to court, if they're driving to visit clients or driving to, to do home visits or depositions, etc. So that's kind of most of our dashboards in a nutshell. There is some death penalty stuff that I was not I'm not able to show only because we currently take the status that on our death penalty cases, because there's only a few of them, or don't release active data on those until the case has been closed. But we are also tracking specific costs and hours in our death penalty cases as well. And with that, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for everybody to ask questions of each of us. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing as well. And Erik has his own tab.
Thank you, all three of you, for your presentations and for walking us through your dashboards. I do see one question in the chat already, but if anyone else from the panel had something they wanted to respond to from what your panelists had said, we could start there. Okay, I'll dig into the question that's in the chat, and then I see you, Neil, and I'll pivot to you next. For Erik, were district offices resistant to providing the required info? And if so, have they found that having the dashboard was worth the effort?
As regards case data, they were very resistant because it was extra work, and to be honest, I mean, we've been doing this for 16 years, and at first they were paper people, and this was extra data entry. Since then, a lot of people, and I hate to be ageist, especially at my age, but the older attorneys are still not really comfortable with technology by and large, whereas the newer people coming up, they don't want to use paper anymore. So they're much more receptive. As regards the financial data, they're lawyers, so they want to be very, very careful with the public fisc. So we didn't have a lot of resistance there, and we have a high degree of confidence that the data is good financial data. So they're finding the chiefs that do regularly consult with their dashboard find it really, really useful. We still have a couple of old school people that just don't really, they just don't dig data, and that's just how it's going to be, I guess. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and there was a second question that's for any of the panelists about, do any of you track motions filed by type and result? And I'm wondering if that might be a question that talks about looking at indicators of attorney quality and trying to do some measurements around that. But go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say that I have had that data pulled before, especially actually in Pima County. I oftentimes found that data was only helpful in one regard. You know, the problem is that so many lawyers don't want the templates that have been approved of in the system. So what they would often do is we would have a blank motion template that would at least just fill out the shell for them with the case information. And many of the lawyers, especially ones that management felt were of good quality, would generally only open the blank motion. Other than the motions to continue were very easy because it was so quick and fast to do. And we did find value in, and we actually have done it in Pinal County more as an ad hoc basis, but we did find value in seeing particular lawyers who never even used the blank motion, but only filed motions to continue. So it was helpful in that regard. But outside of that, unfortunately, while we have all sorts of templates that talk about specific types of substantive motion to compel, motion for evidence and stuff, we didn't really find it to be of value, at least from my perspective. I don't know if Erik or Stev had any experiences otherwise.
Yeah, we don't track that either. One of the things when we developed our case management system, and we had many meetings about this internally with our subject matter experts and attorneys and so on, was the balance between collecting data that was interesting and useful, and then leaving people the time to actually mount a vigorous defense. But we got a lot of pushback. We had a whole lot of things that management wanted in terms of getting data points tracked on a case, and we had some pushback from attorneys and other line staff that were like, "Oh, we're just spending all day clicking buttons. We're all spending all day entering stuff in." And so it was a big balance. And one of those things that we had to jettison was was that sort of tracking the result of hearings and individual hearings and motions. And then other little things that we just ended up kind of getting rid of really specific time entry codes and making them a little bit more general because we found that scrolling through a list of like 200 codes was not being a benefit to folks. And so we kind of cut that down to a really short list. And on the flip side of that, we actually expanded how we track case closures to get more data on that. We used to just have plead guilty as charged, plead guilty reduced charge, and people were one of the kind of red lights that we have is when an attorney has too many plead guilty as charges. The question is like, well, what did you do there? And we never want to see that. And they say, oh well, there were a lot of negotiated incentives, but really there was we had to click that button because it was the only one there. And so it was like, all right. So when we rethought about how we wanted to restructure case closures, we made more detail in that to capture what we consider to be good wins, but maybe an old data was like not looking fantastic. And so, but to get back to the question, it was really trying to find a balance in what we wanted to track and what people thought was helpful. And that was unfortunately one of the things that people liked, thought was cool, but was not going to be something that that our staff was going to be happy entering in constantly.
Yeah, thank you. Neil, can I pass it to you?
Great, thanks everybody. So I work for the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, so we're the state oversight body and the grant makers. So we're not overseeing any kind of direct casework, but we're trying to promote better and more data collection, more data utilization in some of our local system partners. And so we're in all different stages depending on where everybody is. But we've got places that have, well-established case management systems and things like that, but they don't have this kind of data analysis dashboard insight piece of it. And we would love to push them to get to that place. So I would be curious from, particularly Steph and Paul, but also from Erik, what kind of expense and time and work and staff, participation was needed to like build and maintain the data, not the data entry in the case management, but the actual dashboards and the insights and those kind of things. What kind of investment would this take to push some of our bigger systems to do something like this?
Paul, you can go.
Oh, I was going to let you. Your last
okay.
8 months of your life has been
well. Yeah, that's true. So you're saying that the case management system is in place. You just kind of want to get to that next step. So what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. So like a lot of our bigger systems, they're entering this kind of data, but their ability to like actually look at the insights and query things is non-existent.
Yeah. One of the financial things that we had to get over was and this is really boring, but it's the hosting of the data. It's like finding a contract to host the data and have that data accessible, and then having the database architecture in a way that can be queried directly via some sort of business intelligence platform. And that's thousands of dollars a month depending on the size of the data. And so that's not I think for some smaller agencies, that's a pretty big line item on a budget. It was kind of packed in with our case management system and our larger kind of IT budget with the rest of our departments, right? The sheriff and metro and buses and roads. I mean, they're all sort of paying into their IT department here in the county. So it's a little bit easier for us, but I think it'd be harder. So that's one item. When it comes to like setting it up and I would say it's probably 1 FTE. So for me, this is my job, and this is I do other things, but I was hired to do the data and do the analysis, and so I would estimate that it's probably one FTE to get this going. And as I mentioned during my presentation, I do strongly think that once you get it sort of set up, it gets an inertia behind it. you can get them set, but they just refresh every day. And so that one FTE is not, in the data mine every day, clanking away on the same stuff. They're able to kind of branch out and broaden and do additional work for other ad hoc reports, or to inform policy, or provide information for grants or so on. But I would say that it's probably one person. And then we do have another FTE that just kind of manages the data quality, and helps with people entering the data and manages the case management system. So I think that's, and we've got a staff of about 500. So that's two, I'd say, 1.5, 2 out of 500.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add to that, other than one thing, and that is that I don't know why, and perhaps it's because attorneys are trained to always find the argument, but I do think that there's also a resistance from attorney supervisors at times, because they're like, well, that data dashboard is there, but then I know this person has that one case. And I'm like, that's great. Guess what? The data isn't making the decision. You are. I'm just giving you data to help make those decisions. And I think that you have to remind everybody. And when we're sitting around a table and people are like, well, we just don't know how we could do this. And I'm like, well, if we had some data, you would be able to. And so I just have to kind of be that broken record sometimes in meetings and reminding people, you could do this with the data. But it is, I agree with Steph. I mean, it's an FTE. And I think especially from a statewide thing, I mean, Eric might be able to talk a little bit about how is it that from a statewide that you could help local offices sort of see the value in that data, and or maybe you find an agency, that one of your particular agencies that's a little bit more willing, and use them as a sort of a case point. I don't know, Eric, if you experienced this from a statewide thing, because you've been around a long time.
Yeah, we definitely see that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, some people just understand and recognize the value of these analytics, and other people just are resistant, and there's not much you can do. We had a pretty significant culture change in the first 5 years, and then it kind of froze, and just some people don't, I guess maybe they're intimidated. A lot of lawyers joke that they went to law school because they can't do math, and so this kind of looks like math, I guess. So some people are just going to be resistant, and the bottom line is, at least in our system, the people who end up being in charge of an office went to law school, not business school, not management school. So these tools kind of, if they want to look at it, it's going to help them with things that they were never trained in. Tracking a budget. Law school doesn't teach you how to deal with a $2 million budget. So we provide the metrics and encourage them to use it. But at the end of the day, they're making the decision. So they can use the data or not, but they're going to make mistakes. They're going to answer to it. Hopefully, anyway.
Thank you, all three of you. We are at the top of our time, and there are questions in the chat that we're going to email to our panelists so they can respond to those folks who had chat questions, so that we can make sure to answer those questions. I see yours, Genevieve, Scott, and Isaac. So we, as the IDRA board, will take on the responsibility of getting those chat questions to our panelists so that they can reach out and respond to you all. And maybe we'll even have you guys, if you don't mind, panelists, we'll put your responses out to the full IDRA listserv, or at least everyone who attended this, so they can see those responses. But I just want to say thank you again so much for your time, for everyone who joined us, for our panelists, and for those who organized this meeting. We really appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody.